My wife slept with her boss for work, so I shattered her reputation by exposing her to her proud parents. At 31, I've been married to Kara, who's 30, for 3 years. She has carved out a successful career in the advertising world, while I have worked my way up to an executive position at a multinational corporation. Our relationship, though never conventional, has always been built on mutual respect and understanding. We're not the overly affectionate type, and that suits us just fine. We've never been the mushy couple, and we're okay with that. I met Kara on a dating app, and after several years of an unpredictable back-and-forth connection, we finally decided to settle down. It wasn't some whirlwind romance. It was steady, grounded, and felt right. There's a balance between us, a mature dynamic that values space and boundaries. For years, I've understood the unpredictability of her job. Kara is a creative developer, which means late nights, early mornings, and all sorts of erratic hours. I've always been supportive of her career demands, always willing to make it work. But lately, something's been off. I try to talk to her about it, bringing up the growing distance between us, but she brushed me off, telling me I was just overthinking things. "You're imagining problems," she said, as if it were nothing. But deep down, I knew something wasn't quite right. It all started last year when my nephew, Julian, who's 25, graduated from a cinematography course. He was eager to find work, and since Kara had connections in the advertising industry, he reached out to her for help. His timing was unfortunate. Her agency wasn't hiring cinematographers at the time. However, Kara, ever the connector, tried to hook him up with some of her friends at other agencies. Several months later, out of the blue, Julian got an offer from her own agency. Not only was it a job, but the pay was impressive. Kara's reaction was unexpected. She advised him not to take the offer. She told him it was a bad idea to switch companies so quickly and warned that her agency had a toxic work culture. Now, I knew Kara had been working there for years and had never once mentioned how toxic the place was. It raised a red flag, but I didn't push her at first. That is, until Julian seemed unsure about her advice. He didn't outright challenge her, but I could tell by his expression that he wasn't buying it. He said he was going to think it over, research the company, and weigh his options. So, I decided to drop it for a while. Time passed, and I thought little more of it. Then one evening, Kara came home looking like a storm cloud. She stormed into the house, practically radiating anger. I asked her what was wrong, but she simply waved me off and headed straight for the bathroom. I figured it was something work-related, so I didn't think much of it. But when she came out, she didn't seem any better. She went straight to bed, not even touching her dinner. At first, I assumed it was just exhaustion from a tough day at work. But when I tried to comfort her and encourage her to eat, she refused, saying she was just too tired. I backed off, respecting her need for space. After all, sometimes the stress of her job really does take its toll. The next morning, things seemed normal again. She didn't mention the previous night's episode, so I kept quiet too, not wanting to stir the pot. But later that evening, she came home late, her anger practically sizzling in the air. This time, she didn't wait for me to ask. She exploded. Her rage was focused on one thing, Julian. She was furious that he had ignored her advice and decided to join her agency anyway. In a heated outburst, she told me how no one in my family respected her opinion, how they all dismissed her advice. I was stunned. It wasn't as though Julian had done anything wrong. He was an adult. He had the right to make his own decisions. Yet, Kara was acting as if his choice was a personal betrayal. Kara has always been strong-willed, and I've admired that about her. Her sharp mind and unyielding determination have made her incredibly successful in a career where women often have to fight harder to be heard. She's always been the type to stand her ground, and I've learned to appreciate that trait. In fact, it was because of her strong personality that I fell for her in the first place. But sometimes her confidence crosses into something else, an ego that's hard to navigate. When we first started dating, it was tough. Kara would make decisions without budging, and I had a hard time dealing with it. Over time, though, I learned to trust her instincts, even when they didn't always align with logic. More often than not, she was right. So when she went off on me that night, I knew better than to escalate things. Getting angry would only make matters worse. Instead, I stayed calm. I reassured her that I trusted her judgment, but I also told her that we couldn't force our family to follow our lead. Julian was his own person, and he had made his choice. All we could do now was let him experience the consequences of that decision. And if he regretted it later, let him learn from it. I reassured her that, in the end, she'd have the last laugh. Of course, I didn't want my nephew to suffer, but everyone must face the consequences of their own choices. It wasn't as though he was bound to this job forever. He could always walk away if things didn't work out. Kara stayed quiet, and I did my best to soothe her. I couldn't tell if my words had made any impact, so I decided to drop it for the time being. Weeks turned into months, yet Kara's behavior remained unpredictable. One day she was warm and engaging. The next she seemed like a stranger, distant, cold. I tried confronting her several times, but each time she shrugged it off, attributing it to stress from work. She kept insisting that I was overthinking, that everything was fine. Curiously, I asked if she was still upset about Julian's decision, but she insisted that he no longer mattered to her. While her words were harsh, I couldn't help but think this was just a passing phase. After all, Kara was strong-willed, and I trusted she would snap out of it in time. I hadn't spoken to Julian since he joined the agency, but I figured he was doing well enough since he hadn't quit yet. My concern, however, was more about Kara's behavior. Sometimes, I wondered if her coldness had to do with Julian disregarding her advice, as though she didn't feel valued. Other times, I felt something deeper was at play, something I couldn't pinpoint. I began to entertain the possibility that she was hiding something. Perhaps something at work that she didn't want me or Julian to discover. Update 1. A few days ago, things took an unexpected turn. I hadn't been too involved with the situation since, as I mentioned earlier, I let it pass. Instead, I focused on my own life, diving into my work, joining the gym, and setting a personal goal to lose 10 pounds. But last week, something came up that I wasn't prepared for. It was Julian's birthday. To be honest, I rarely remember birthdays, except for Kara's and our anniversary. I would have forgotten altogether if I hadn't seen it posted on social media. So I called him up to wish him well. His voice was cheerful, but when I asked him about work, he suddenly went quiet. Then, he surprised me by asking to meet for lunch. A 25-year-old doesn't normally request a birthday lunch with their uncle unless there's something serious going on. I assumed it was work-related. I trusted Kara's warnings about Julian's boss, and I thought maybe Julian had realized the truth about the toxic environment at the agency. So, I agreed to meet him. To make it happen, I had to fake being sick to take the day off, but my curiosity about what Julian wanted to talk about made me go through with it. When we met, Julian seemed uneasy, awkward even. He wasn't his usual self. I tried asking him directly if something was bothering him, but he denied it. Even when I asked about work, he said everything was going smoothly. His strange behavior made me uncomfortable, so I finally pushed him, bluntly asking if he had something on his mind. That's when it all came out. Julian admitted that he'd noticed something odd about Kara's relationship with her boss, the creative head at her agency. Apparently, they were always seen having lunch together, taking coffee breaks, and leaving the office early together. It had become a topic of gossip around the office. Julian was upset because people were speaking badly about Kara. He didn't want to hear those kinds of rumors about his aunt, but even he couldn't escape the office chatter. I asked him if he was sure about what he'd seen. He clenched his hands and apologized profusely, hesitating before finally admitting that it could all be baseless speculation. After all, Kara often had to leave early for client meetings, so maybe there was an innocent explanation. But my mind was racing. Julian wasn't entirely sure of anything, and I had no solid evidence to confront Kara. The whole situation was suffocating. When I got home that evening, I felt disoriented. I spent the night alone, lost in my thoughts. At dinner, I barely ate, my mind heavy with confusion. Kara asked if something was wrong, but I only nodded in response. I couldn't sleep that night, my mind spinning in circles. Finally, I found the courage to ask her about it. I blurted out, "What was the real reason you didn't want Julian to join your agency?" She looked taken aback. "Why bring this up again?" she asked, clearly irritated. But I pressed on, telling her I had met with Julian that day and that he was happy with his work and his boss. Kara rolled her eyes and set her phone down. She took a deep breath before answering, her voice quieter now. "You know I didn't mean any harm," she said. But maybe the reason he didn't fit in at the agency was because of his mindset. He's very conservative. He raises his eyebrows at things like short skirts or low necklines. His boss? Well, he's even worse. He's a chauvinist. I just didn't feel comfortable with Julian working there. I asked her why she hadn't told me all of this before. Kara looked uncomfortable. "I didn't think it was necessary, and I didn't want to hurt you," she admitted. I stayed quiet after that. Looking back, I could see she had a point. I'd often heard Julian make comments about his sister's clothes, or how he didn't like her being independent. He had even threatened a boy once just for talking to his sister at school. I was conflicted. I trusted Kara, but something didn't feel right. Though I still had faith in her, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, Julian was right this time. Update 2. A few days passed, and the advice I'd received from some of you made me rethink my approach. After careful consideration, I decided to ask Julian to gather some solid proof of the things he had told me. I knew he'd be reluctant. Who would want to be tangled in this mess, especially with family? He didn't want to be branded a marriage wrecker. But I assured him that even if his suspicions turned out to be misguided, I wouldn't accuse anyone of anything. However, if he was right, if there was truth to his story, then what better way to uncover it than by exposing a deceitful relationship? After some back and forth, he finally agreed. "I'll try," he said, "but I can't promise anything." Then everything took a turn for the worse. Kara returned home one evening, her anger palpable. She immediately started accusing me of using Julian to spy on her. The fury in her eyes was unmistakable as she claimed that Julian's actions had made her life unbearable at work. She even threatened to have him fired if he continued his investigation. I was caught off guard, unsure of how to respond. "Why are you reacting like this?" I asked, trying to understand, but she wasn't having it. She threw my own involvement in my face, accusing me of plotting this from the beginning and using Julian as my unwitting accomplice. The guilt hit me like a ton of bricks. I hated lying to her, but I swore I wasn't behind any of this. Kara, however, insisted that Julian had been following her every move, watching her closely at work, keeping track of where she went, whether it was the cafeteria or the terrace for a smoke break. That's when the full weight of Julian's foolishness hit me. What was he thinking? Why would he follow her around like some amateur detective? Even if Kara was up to something, she wouldn't do it out in the open like that. I began hoping that his suspicions were nothing more than a false alarm, a misunderstanding. I tried to calm Kara down. "I'll talk to Julian," I promised. "I'll set him straight." In my mind, I was already planning to meet Julian that weekend and tell him to focus on his own career instead of meddling in Kara's life. But the very next day, I received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Stewart, Kara's father. I was stunned. He told me that he had heard about what was happening and suggested that I put a stop to Julian's behavior immediately. I was speechless. "Did Kara tell you?" I asked cautiously, though I already had a sinking feeling. Mr. Stewart explained that he had been near Kara's office that afternoon, so they decided to have lunch together. Over lunch, Kara had apparently shared everything with him, how Julian had been spying on her at work. I wasn't sure whether to believe it. Was Kara exaggerating? Or was she really trying to blow the situation out of proportion? Regardless, I assured Mr. Stewart that I would take care of it. But as I hung up the phone, I felt a strange mix of dread and uncertainty. When Kara returned home, I told her about her father's call. She didn't seem surprised, admitting that she had indeed talked to him about the issue. "It's my father," she snapped. "I have every right to discuss my problems with him." At this point, I couldn't help but reflect on Mr. Stewart's character. He was the kind of father who took his protective instincts to a whole new level. The type of man who would pull out a gun if he thought someone was even glancing at his daughter the wrong way. And of course, he never missed a chance to boast about how proud he was to have an independent daughter. I understood his pride, but at times his over-the-top behavior was exhausting. Despite the tension, I called Julian that same day and arranged to meet him the following week. The rest of the week passed quietly, but the anticipation of our meeting weighed heavily on me. The weekend came, and I met Julian, hoping to put an end to the chaos he'd caused. But to my surprise, he had something else in mind. Before I could say anything, Julian stopped me. "I want to show you something," he said, pulling out his laptop. My heart sank as he clicked through a series of files, eventually pausing at a video clip. I watched in stunned silence as he fast-forwarded to a scene that sent a chill down my spine. There was Kara in an elevator with her boss. He was touching her hands, brushing her skin as they exchanged files. But it didn't stop there. As the video continued, I saw more. His hands all over her body in the confined space of the elevator, and later, in the deserted fire exit stairwell. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The footage was unmistakable. This wasn't just one clip, it was multiple, each showing Kara and her boss in compromising positions. My mind raced. My heart pounded as I tried to process what this meant. Was this the truth? Had Julian been right all along? Or had he stumbled upon something even worse? A betrayal I never saw coming? The weight of the situation crushed me as I sat there, watching those clips unfold. My mind spun, but I couldn't bring myself to watch the rest of it. With my eyes wide open, I ordered Julian to send me all the files. How did you even get this footage? I asked, my voice trembling as I tried to grasp how he had managed to gain such access. He hesitated before responding. I can't exactly name names, but I have some connections in the engineering department. They helped me hack into the cameras covering the more isolated areas of the office. I was speechless. As I processed his words, my stomach churned. When I arrived home, Kara wasted no time confronting me. "Did you set Julian straight?" she demanded. I nodded, barely containing my frustration. "I told him to stay out of your business, especially when it involves your boss." I shot back, my voice rising as the anger inside me boiled over. I could see her trying to maintain composure, but the look in her eyes betrayed her. She tried to spin the situation, casting herself as the victim, accusing Julian of harboring deep hatred for her. I cut her off mid-sentence. "I have undeniable proof of your boss touching you in ways you never should have allowed," I spat, my voice trembling with the weight of the truth. Kara froze. Her defiant posture faltered for just a second as the reality of the situation hit her. But true to form, she quickly regained her arrogance, dismissing the footage as nothing more than an invasion of privacy. "This is absurd," she scoffed. "Julian has no right to invade my personal space at work, and neither do you. You need to verify these claims before you ruin my reputation." It took everything in me not to scream. "I have evidence of you and your boss sneaking off to hotel rooms together," I said, my voice cold and steady. I wasn't sure if Julian had told me the entire truth, but I used what he had given me: the name of the hotel where Kara and her boss frequently stayed. I didn't know much more than that, but I used the information to bluff. "I know everything," I lied, my words laced with venom I couldn't contain. "I know about the hotel. I know where you and your boss have been going." Her reaction was instant. She was speechless, clearly caught off guard by my statement. I watched her try to regain control, but the tension hung in the air like a suffocating fog. Finally, Kara slumped into a chair, defeated but unwilling to admit anything outright. "You need to hear me out before you jump to conclusions," she said, her voice softening. I crossed my arms, trying to maintain some semblance of control. "Go ahead," I said, my tone colder than I had intended. Kara took a deep breath before continuing. "Look, I work in advertising. It's part of the business. I have to keep my boss happy. It's just the way things work. There's nothing personal between us. It's all for work." Her words were so rehearsed, so calculated, that I almost felt sick. In that moment, anger surged inside me. "Are you really trying to tell me that? That it was just for work?" My voice shook with disbelief. "That's nothing but a coward's excuse, Kara. You might as well be selling yourself for the job." I could feel the weight of my words sinking in, but Kara wasn't done. She still tried to defend her actions, but I wasn't buying it. "Cheating is the end of the line for me," I told her, my voice firm. "I'm filing for divorce." Her reaction was nothing short of shocking. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She just sat there, silent, as I packed a bag and walked out the door. "You can leave whenever you want," I said coldly. "The next time we meet, it'll be in court." I didn't stick around to hear her response. I needed to get away, to clear my head. That night, I checked into a hotel, my mind racing. The next morning, I caught a flight to Florida. It wasn't just about a change of scenery. I needed to escape the nightmare my life had become. Once I landed, I immediately called my lawyer, filling him in on the situation and making it clear that I wanted the divorce proceedings to move as quickly as possible. He reassured me that he'd have the papers ready and sent to Kara at her parents' house within the week. I wasn't naive enough to think this would be easy. It wouldn't be, but I was ready for it. There was no going back now. Later, as I reflected on everything that had transpired, I couldn't help but seethe with anger. I need to keep my boss happy, the audacity, and then to blame Julian for the misery she had brought upon herself at work. The nerve. It was clear to me now. She had dug her own grave. Julian may have been in the middle of it, but she was the one who had orchestrated this entire charade. It was a shame he had to risk his job for someone so undeserving of any loyalty. But in the end, I didn't know if I would survive this. I didn't know how things would unfold. But one thing was certain. I was done with her. And I would make sure the divorce went through, no matter what. A few weeks passed. The weight of everything still pressed down on me, but I was starting to feel the faintest glimmer of relief. My lawyer had just confirmed that the divorce papers had been sent to Kara's parents' house. I tried to steel myself for whatever would come next. Not long after receiving that confirmation, my phone rang. It was Kara's father. He wasted no time. His voice boomed through the receiver, accusing me and Julian of being egotistical chauvinists. He claimed I was divorcing Kara because we couldn't handle her success. I was taken aback. His words were a complete surprise, and I struggled to process what he was saying. When he finally paused to catch his breath, I took the opportunity to speak. "Do you even know the real reason?" I asked, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Because it's certainly not what you think." Then, I made sure he knew I wasn't bluffing. I had proof. Proof I could no longer keep to myself. While we were still on the phone, I sent in the evidence. "Check your messages," I told him. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. The first part of the silence was him looking at the clips I'd sent, no doubt processing what he was seeing. Then, a deeper silence followed, a silence thick with embarrassment. And I knew he had no words to defend his daughter. I felt a surge of bitterness. "I'm sorry you had to see that," I told him. "But I had no choice. I can't keep quiet about it any longer. I'm not the one to blame here. I'm the victim." No reply, just silence. Then, a soft click as he ended the call. I knew there was nothing more to say. He had seen the truth, and I wasn't going to apologize for showing it to him. A month passed. I returned home, but the situation had only worsened. Kara had moved out of the house, but she wasn't going down without a fight. She contested the divorce, demanding alimony and a share of the house. My lawyer, however, wasn't having any of it. He countered her demands, insisting that I deserved compensation for the mental toll she had caused me. He pointed out that our marriage had been short-lived and that she had no claim to the house, since she had made no financial contribution to its purchase. The legal battle raged on, but I was starting to feel more detached from the chaos. I was in a better place mentally, though I still had a long way to go. I wasn't seeing anyone, and honestly, I had no interest in doing so. I was focusing on getting my life back on track, especially my health. The alcohol I had turned to in my depression was slowly being pushed out of my system, and I was determined not to let it control me anymore. A part of me still couldn't believe the mess I had found myself in, but I was slowly moving on. The hardest part was over. As I read through the responses and support from those who had been following my story, I couldn't help but feel some measure of relief. "Your nephew did the right thing," one person wrote. "You would have still been living a lie if not for him. Kara's dad is delusional, and he should be ashamed of raising a daughter like her," someone else added. "Divorce is tough, but you'll get through it. Just keep working on yourself. You've got this." It was strange. After all the pain, all the betrayal, I was starting to feel like I had the strength to move forward. For the first time in months, I actually felt like I had a future. So I turned the question back to myself. Would I have asked Julian for help if the situation were reversed? Would I have been able to involve him in such a personal, painful matter? The truth was I wasn't sure. The guilt of dragging him into something so dark weighed heavily on me. But I had to admit, if I hadn't gotten his help, I would have been trapped in denial forever. Sometimes, you have to reach out for help, even when it feels wrong. In the end, I didn't feel bad about involving him. He had done the right thing, and so had I, for finally choosing to stand up for myself. Thanks for watching. Follow my YouTube channel for more such videos in future.